Welcome to MCN and a little video where I'm going to talk about all of the superbikes that we've ridden this year, and at the end give you a little idea of which we think is the best. Now, year by year, we say it all the time, superbike evolution is just climbing at an absolute incredible rate. They're more powerful than ever, they're crammed with more electronics than ever, they handle better than ever, and they've kind of become quite niche for that reason. Very specialised bikes really you can only get the best out of on track, and if you're a very good rider, but they have become a lot easier to ride as well, so you can enjoy them in a lot of environments. So I'm going to talk about them in alphabetical order, and what better place to start with the Aprilia. So we've got the Aprilia RS-V4 Factory 1100. We rode that at Mugello at its launch. That costs £23,850. It's got 217 bhp, which makes it the most powerful of all the superbikes, and weighs 204 kilos. We didn't really have much of a go of the Aprilia this year, really. The launch was in kind of mixed conditions. We did get some dryish laps around Mugello, and then since the launch, which was kind of spring 2025, we haven't had much of a chance to ride it, just for availability problems. Even the launch wasn't a proper full-on world launch. We just went along and we were invited by Aprilia on one of their Aprilia track days to come and ride the bike. New for this year, it's basically the same bike it's been for a long time. There's more power, so it's up from 214 to 217. There's more aero. It's got Stegosaurus wings on the seat unit, bigger front wings, geometry tweaks, including raising the engine, changing the actual head angle, that kind of thing. More polished electronics, which is kind of the story that's going to run through all the superbikes this year. One of the things the Aprilia's got is that you can change the electronics via an app, corner by corner on track. So at Mugello, you can have different levels of wheelie control, traction control, engine braking in and out of every corner, which is really something, and that's something really you only see on proper full-on professional race bikes. And of course there's a standard version that hasn't got all the Öhlins electronic suspension. So to ride, it's very hard for us to say exactly where it fits in. It's always been kind of one of the top when it comes to track bikes. It's still quite a small bike. It's still kind of 400cc super sport size, really. It was designed for Biaggi back in the day. And as a result is quite a cramped road bike as well. But it's an amazing thing. The suspension, like a Tuono RS-V4's, just so plush, so velvety, massive feeling for grip, superb brakes that aren't troubled by ABS, an absolute incredible engine sound, like a proper V4 engine sound, unlike the Ducati V4, which is basically sounds like two twins because of the twin pulse firing order. And just incredibly fast. So I would say if you've already got an RS-V4, there's no big reason to kind of change up, because the few extra bhp up top, well, it was hard to access the amount of power it had anyway, and let alone with more. And the other strange thing about the Aprilia is it's not really raced anywhere, because it's an 1100. It does have dispensation to race in some series, some super stock, some superbikes, but really you don't kind of really see it on the world stage. So it's one of those bikes that always kind of bubbles under the surface, but we absolutely love it, and I absolutely love it as well. And I can't wait to ride it properly again next year, hopefully in the dry, hopefully with some of its rivals. And then the next in the alphabet, B, and another bike that's kind of bubbled under the surface but sort of come out of nowhere, and that's the new Bimota KB998 Rimini. That costs £37,777, so it's the most expensive bike that we're going to talk about here. Ridden it at Cadwell, and I think we were the only UK publication to ride it, first anyway. There was no world launch. And the odd thing about the Aprilia, or the Bimota rather, is that it's track only. So it doesn't adhere to Euro 5 or Euro 5 Plus rules, which means Kawasaki, who import Bimotas, who own half of the company, can't sell it as a road bike. But it has lights and indicators and a number plate holder and mirrors and all the rest of it. Ride it on the road other places in the world. That is basically a ZX10 in disguise, for want of a better description. So it's got the ZX10 engine, which makes 197 bhp, weighs 207 kilos, which is relatively heavy. It doesn't feel that heavy, feels quite light because it's all carbon, and it didn't when we rode it around Cadwell, but it's kind of one of the heavier of the superbikes. It's got, as well as the Kawasaki ZX10 engine, it's got the Kawasaki ZX10 suspension, wheels, dash, switchgear, mirrors, fuel cap and electronics, and for that reason it doesn't feel as special as it could. You know, when you look at the Ducati, which we'll talk about later, which everything is bespoke to that bike, everything is absolutely designed to within an inch of its life. It's absolutely amazing. So you'd kind of have to give the Bimota a down market for that reason, but elsewhere it's pure decadent Bimota. So it's got the Bimota chassis, which is a tubular steel frame with aluminium side plates, and that frame is adjustable for everything from ride height to trail to stiffness even. The frame's got a cross member under the tank which you can leave in to make the frame stiff. You can torque it up or down to change the stiffness, or you can take that cross member out completely and make the frame much more flexible. It also has carbon fibre bodywork, including a self-supporting seat unit, adjustable wings, which is a first for a road bike as well. It's got carbon wings, and when the wind pressure gets to a certain point, it changes the angle of the wings, which is pretty cool. And riding at Cadwell, I was a little bit skeptical, to be honest, because the last few Bimotas that I've ridden, I don't know if you remember, they had BMW engines in for a while. They've had lots of different owners. They've kind of been all over the place. They've had Ducati engines back in the day. They had Suzuki engines and Yamaha engines and everything in between. They're a boutique bike manufacturer, and you know, as a result of that, sometimes you get a really good one, sometimes you get a really bad one. But it's definitely changed now. Kawasaki involved. It feels like a mass-produced bike in a good way, but a very special mass-produced bike. And one of the best compliments I can give it is at Cadwell, it felt like a normal bike. So again, it hasn't got hub center steering, so it's got a very conventional feel. Some Bimotas like the Tezis have got hub center steering, which take a bit of getting used to. But the great thing about the Bimota is, I guess they're using the geometry from the ZX10, which is why they've got it right straight away. And the bike does feel quite ZX10-like. The engine character is very similar. It's quite long geared. It's quite peaky like a ZX10. The brakes lack a little bit of sharpness and feel like a ZX10, but the speed is fantastic. The stability is fantastic. The up and down quick shifter is really, really smooth. It gives you a lot of confidence and a lot of feel, and you can kind of see why it's doing so well in World Superbike. You know, it's a top 5 bike already, you know, a bike that's kind of come out of nowhere and in the nicest possible way is kind of a bitzer. It's doing really well, and that, although you can't really make any judgments between road bikes and race bikes because they are so different, but obviously the road bike is a good base. And at Cadwell we tested it against very, very recently a BMW S1000RR, Panigale V4S and a Honda Fireblade, and of those bikes it felt the raciest out of the crate. It kind of felt somewhere between a road bike and a super stock bike. So, you know, if I had the choice to carry on riding all day on that bike at a track day, I'd choose the Bimota, just because it kind of, you know, the steering's fantastic, the feel's brilliant, loads of ground clearance. It just did everything that a race bike does, but it was just a little bit softer. And you can make the other bikes feel like that. We'll come on to that later. But out of the crate, the Bimota is probably the raciest of all the thousands, but in a good way, not in a gnarly way. So that brings us on to the next BMW. So we've been testing the BMW S1000RR Sport recently, which is kind of one of the top spec models with electronic suspension. That starts at £19,330, and then you can add all sorts on it. As we all know with BMWs, you can go mad with the options boxes. Our long-termer that we've got this year that we've been using for some of the tests that Carl Stevens, the deputy editor of MCN, has got the M package and carbon fibre wheels, so you can go mad with a BMW, as we all know. That's got 207 bhp, weighs 198 kilos, so it's one of the lighter ones. For 2025, it's got very light engine tweaks for Euro 5 Plus. It's got new aero, the wings on it are just ridiculously big. Tweaked electronics, it's got a quicker action throttle from the M, and of course there are standard versions as well. The BMW, we also tested it with those group of bikes on the road as well. As you'd expect, BMW is a fantastic road bike. It's probably the most naturally laid out, the most comfortable of all the superbikes. It's actually very, very tall, which is quite strange, really tall. Even I'm 6 foot and I'm on tiptoes on it at a standstill. But you've got heated grips and cruise control and all that stuff, which I really don't understand why other manufacturers don't do, because it's one of the first things anyone that rides a BMW talks about. And it kind of gives it an advantage straight off the bat. And if the other manufacturers did the same, then I think they would level up the BMW. But it's a bike we all kind of know and love. It hasn't really changed much over the years. It's incredibly fast. It handles amazingly. The brakes are packed with feel and power. And, you know, compared to its rivals, it does feel a little bit old-fashioned now. It does feel a little bit big, but it's so effective. And on the track as well, it's just a bike you can just jump on and it's quite familiar straight away. You know, back in the day, this bike kind of started its development as a BMW engine with a Suzuki GSX-R chassis. So you can kind of see why it feels so familiar. It feels like a very well-sorted Japanese bike. At track, it's got power everywhere. You could go around Cadwell in 6th gear and still fire out the corners fast. As it is, it's just, the engine is there all the time. You can just explode out of the corners. The electronics are really effective. Wheelie control, the quick up and down quick shift is really good, if not a little bit springy, which BMWs always are. Sounds amazing, pops and bangs off the throttle. You can get under the fairing, and it's just very nice riding position for the track as well as the road. Definitely one of our favourites. So the BMW is right up there. It's never really done that well at racing, has it, until Top Rack turned up, and now it's a good road racer as well. But just an amazing bike that anyone can get on with. One bike we haven't ridden is its kind of sister, its homologation special sister, which is the M1000RR. That's 32,850 pounds. That's 215 bhp and 194 kilos, because it's got loads of carbon on it. If you want kind of the best of the best BMW, then I guess that's the bike for you. But I would say I think the S1000RR is better, because the M1000RR has been produced to go racing. So the engine is more tunable. It's got mechanically adjustable suspension instead of electronic, because the idea is, as a race bike, you'll change the suspension internals on the forks, you'd get a new rear shock, so you don't need such a high level suspension as standard. So although the M has kind of got the kudos and the bling, I would say for a track day rider or a road rider, the S1000RR is better, because it's got electronic suspension and it's just a little bit easier to kind of get on with, although the M's mechanically adjustable suspension is fantastic. And then if you're going to go down the road of changing all those suspension components and brakes and everything, and the brakes are amazing as well, then obviously it would let you do that. Moving on to another Italian from the Bimota, the Ducati Panigale V4S, brand new for 2025. I rode it at its launch in Vallelunga last September. It was one of the first bikes to be launched in 2025. Rode it at Cadwell, group test that we did the other week, which you can read all about in MCN newspaper, ridden on the road as well. So this is £29,995, so one of the more expensive. 213 brake horsepower and 187 kilos, which seems to be the lightest, but Ducati give their figures wet with no fuel, and the other manufacturers give weight figures of completely full, so it's hard to really judge where it sits in the weight comparison, but it does feel very light to ride. The engine isn't that different from the 2024 bike, just Euro 5 mods, but everything else is new. So you've got a new frame and swing arm. So the idea behind that is it's a lot more flexible. And Ducati over the last few years have decided to make their bikes friendlier. They went through a very angry stage. The original Panigale V-twins were very angry. The original V4 was quite angry, and the Superleggeras, and they basically made them softer and softer over the years, to a point where, as well as electronics and mapping to make the bike softer and easier to ride, they've gone down the road of making the chassis more flexible as well, so you get more feel, so the bike's less snappy. So the big difference, the visual difference, is the double-sided swing arm replacing the single-sider, which again is for flex. So the swing arm is, I don't know, 30-odd% more flexible than before, something like that, and it's got more stiffness in the right direction as well. Same with the frame. The frame that it uses is a lot more flexible, so there's a lot more feel from the bike. And it's also got revised electronics, a new widescreen dash, uprated styler calipers, and there's also a standard version which is cheaper relatively, and there's going to be a new V4R which is going to come out at the beginning of 2026, which is going to form the basis for the world superbike racer. The V4R's got a 1000 engine instead of the 1100 of the V4S, but it gets all of the V4S's new chassis modifications to make it easier to ride. Loads of updates, including a new gearbox where neutral was at the bottom, so you don't have to pass through neutrals to get from second to first and vice versa, and you can only access neutral with a button on the handlebars that lets you get into neutral. It's undeniably impressive. One of the things I like most about the Panigale is the fact that it's very easy to ride. It's very, very spacious, real wide bars, flat bars almost, widely spaced. You've got lots and lots of leg room, lots of room to move forward and back on the seat, a nice big screen. So for a tall rider, it's fantastic. Around Cadwell, just such a piece of cake to ride because of all the electronics. It never feels intimidating. It always does exactly what you want it to do. You never feel like the electronics are holding you back. You just feel like you're getting the amount of power that you need at that given time. Full of drama. It's just, yeah, the bikes, like all of these super bikes, are much, much better than mere mortals like us. On the road, it's a little bit of a different story. All of the things that go towards making it so safe and friendly on track, electronics-wise, kind of detract from how rewarding it is on the road. It kind of feels, although it's unquestionably rapid, it feels kind of dumbed down a little bit. It feels a little bit muted because of all the electronics are there helping you get maximum performance, which sounds good in the real world, but it's kind of missing some of that involvement. And also it's very uncomfortable. Although it's spacious, it's probably got the lowest handlebars of all the bikes. So after a couple of hours of being on the road, you're going to get really sore wrists and a sore neck from looking up so high. But it's an amazing thing. The build quality is superb. The paint finishes, you just stand there and drink it in when you're beside the bike. It's amazing. Then we come on to the latest Honda. Now that's not a 2025 bike, it's a 2024 bike. We rode it last year at its launch at Portimao. We've ridden on the road as well with its rivals. £23,699. Who would have ever thought a Fireblade would be 24 grand? It's just insane. 215 bhp. 201 kilos, so quite light. So that's got more or less the same power. So this shape Fireblade came out in 2020. I rode out at the world launch in Qatar. It's been an immediate success for super stock racers, maybe not at the superbike level, but those bikes are so different. The success of a superbike is as much down to the team and the resources as the bike itself. It was quite gnarly to ride in standard trim. It was quite tall geared, quite revvy, very, very cramped, but it's evolved over the years to become friendlier in the same kind of way that Ducati has. So the power was the same as before with the 24 bike, but there's more mid-range for more road oomph. The engine's more tunable now for racing. It's got shorter gearing, which really helps. Split throttle bodies, so instead of a line of 4 fixed throttle bodies across the inline 4 engine, there's a 2 and a 2. and those throttle bodies open independently of each other, which we'll go into in a minute. It's got new 3rd generation Öhlins electronic suspension, new aero, a bigger fuel tank, reshaped fuel tank, more flexible frame again to make it easier to ride. Brembo styler calipers, better ABS, better electronics, and those electronics even go to, if you go to the dash and plug in how heavy you are, it would give you suggested suspension settings, which is really cool as well. And of course that comes in standard trim. On track, I can see why it's such a fantastic super stock racer. Of all the bikes, it feels the most compact. It's almost like if you had a ball under your hand and you're rolling the ball around a table, you roll the ball front and back, and there's no resistance. It just rolls beautifully side to side in every direction. That's how the blade feels. It feels beautiful. And the other bikes maybe feel a little bit egg-shaped, a bit eggy, not quite as natural as the blade. The blade is fantastic, undeniably fast. The gearing is a bit too long on track. At Cadwell, where we rode it, it didn't absolutely launch out of the slower corners. Still quite cramped, especially for a taller rider. And the brakes, although they're improved, they've got a little bit of a wooden mushy feel compared to the European bikes. But different story on the road. When we rode all the bikes back to back, I was expecting the blade to be like it was. Not a particularly nice road bike, but I was so impressed because all of these changes has made the blade feel like an analog bike, despite the fact it's pumped full of electronics. So you still get that kind of gravelly engine note. It feels like a 2008 blade or a 2017 blade that just so happens to be a bit more refined and has more electronic aids, but it's still kind of got that raw analogy kind of feel. The riding position isn't too uncomfortable on the road, but it's full of drama. The way the engine braking control works, there's a lot of pops and bangs off the throttle. The way the split throttle bodies work, so in its upper riding modes, in its racier riding modes, what happens is when you're off the throttle and you're at a small throttle opening and you start to get on the gas again, only 2 of the throttle butterflies are open. So it's basically turning the blade into a twin, reducing the power and making it more controllable on the throttle. But it also makes the blade gurgle like a world superbike racer, and it's absolutely fantastic. It makes it easy to ride. Once you put the race kit on, you can change when those throttle butterflies open. You know, you can have it coming in on 4 cylinders a bit earlier, a bit later, with more or less lean angle and everything in between. So yeah, it's a really impressive bike, and it's kind of got that real beautiful HRC feel about it. It feels like a new generation RC30 with the way it's made, and you know, the quality of the components and the paint finish is just absolutely sublime. Then we move on to a couple of bikes we haven't ridden. So we've got the ZX10R, still a current 2025 model. That's 17,499. 200 brake horsepower, 207 kilos, so right in the ballpark of all the others. But we haven't ridden it this year, basically because it hasn't changed. Since making this video, Kawasaki has surprised us with the new ZX10R for 2026. The old one never went away, but now the ZX10R and ZX10RR homologation special gets wings with a claimed 25% increase in front downforce. It also has a repositioned ram air intake, a larger 5-inch dash and Euro 5 Plus engine tweaks. Everything else from the suspension, brakes, chassis and electronics remain the same. The outgoing ZX10R cost £17,999 in 2025 and made 200 bhp, but Kawasaki haven't yet confirmed the price or the power of the new bike. The ZX10RR will continue to have racier conrods, pistons, braided steel brake lines and an adjustable Öhlins steering damper. So, you know, when we've done group tests in the past, we've always been impressed with the ZX10. How can you not be with a bike that's performance so high? Then there's a Suzuki. So there's a new GSX-R1000R, but that's not coming out until spring 2026, we believe. More or less the same GSX-R1000R that we waved goodbye to a few years ago when it wasn't Euro 5 Plus. So it hasn't changed that much. but we're looking forward to riding it because it's a great bike. Then there's the Yamaha. So unfortunately, Yamaha stopped selling the R1 as a road legal machine in the UK and Europe, but you can still buy it. There's a Yamaha R1 Race, which is basically that old road bike, but track only. That's £18,750. Then if you wanted to get a little bit racier with some of the nice bits, there's a track only Yamaha R1 GYTR, which is 27,200. So they're all the thousands. We've ridden most of them. We haven't ridden some of them, but it can still give you a bit of a verdict. So if you were going to buy 1,000 and just ride them on the road only, what's the best road bike? Well, I'd say you could narrow that down to two. The BMW, because it is so friendly as a road bike. As I said before, it's got all those creature comforts. It's a super bike you can do distance on very easily. You know, stick a tank bag and a tail pack on, and you're not going to have too much in the way of discomfort. Like I say, Deputy Editor Carl Stevens has got one of these this year, and he rode it to Germany and back without any problems. So the BMW is definitely up there as one of the best road bikes, although perhaps you could argue that the quality of it and the kind of desirability of it isn't as good as some of its kind of flashier rivals. And then the Blade. So I think one of the Blade, in terms of the enjoyment it gives you in isolation, I'd say is probably one of the best superbikes now, just because of the involvement, because of the engine character, the way it makes you feel. You don't need to be doing silly speeds to enjoy the Blade like you would do with the other bikes, because they're all so capable. You can enjoy the Blade at normal road speeds, and it's a fantastic thing. You know, like I say, it's beautifully built and finished. You can sit back and admire it over a cup of tea. So BMW and Honda, I'd say, is the best road bikes. The best bike for a track day. Now, this is an interesting one because the level of these bikes is so high. Which is the best can change track by track, person by person, tyre by tyre. They're all in excess of what we can handle in terms of power and handling. They're all amazing. So I would say you kind of need to look at all of these superbikes as a blank canvas. So for example, the Bimota is probably the best out the crate if you did nothing to it. And the BMW and Ducati are fantastic out of the crate as well. So you just need to turn up to a track day with those bikes, put them in race mode. The electronic suspension changes on the BMW and the Ducati at least. So it'll put you in like a racier setup, racier throttle, racier electronics, and off you go. You can just ride all day and not worry about it. But then you've got bikes like the Blade, which if we were to put a lap timer on all the bikes standard, would probably be the slowest, because it's not geared right for most tracks. It's a little bit too long geared. But if you changed that, if you changed the brakes, if you gave it a more spacious riding position, then suddenly you'd make the Blade one of the best. I suppose the only way to judge which is kind of the fastest around the track is to look at superstock racing, really, because they're all the ultimate evolutions of the road bikes without too much kind of help from factory teams and data engineers and all the rest of it. So the Blade's kind of the king of superstock at the moment. So you'd have to say the Blade's one of the best track bikes. Then, which is the fastest? So what we haven't done this year is a full-on group test using controlled tyres, using a professional rider, at our own hot and sunny racetrack. But like I say, I think the times would be within a second of each other. They always are. They always have been. Every single sports bike group test we've ever done is that close. And like I say, the times would change depending on the conditions or how you got the bike set up. So I think it's probably more important to gravitate, if you're just worried about absolute lap times, towards the bike that you're going to feel kind of most comfortable on. I think the Blade will probably need the most work to get it into a race form, but once it's there, probably be the best. And the BMW and the Ducati are easy just to jump on and ride fast straight away, as is the Bimota. But then you're kind of looking at a lot of money for those bikes as well. And you know, there's a little part in you that's probably not going to push as hard as maybe you could do, because you don't want to see nearly £40,000 upside down on a tyre wall. And then finally, the most impressive, you know, what is the most impressive superbike of them all? It's got to be between the Bimota and the Ducati. The Bimota is definitely the most pricey, it's the rarest, it's the one that draws the biggest crowd. Everywhere we've taken it, it's done just that. You know, people wondering what it is, pointing at the carbon fibre, the quality is just all there. But I think some of the desirability kind of goes when you look at all the Kawasaki parts. I can see why they did it, and they all work beautifully. They don't detract from the way the bike handles or goes. But in terms of pure impressiveness, maybe it's lacking a little bit. So you'd have to point towards the Ducati. You know, the tie between that Ducati road bike and their racing exploits is really close. You know, you see that bike being raced in the Champions race at the Ducati big festival. World Ducati Week, that's the one, World Ducati Week. All the superstars race those V4s and they're within seconds of their MotoGP bike. So, you know, if you buy a Ducati, you're going to have a bike that's got that much capability. You've got a bike that's unutterably beautiful. You've got a bike with probably the most advanced electronics of anything. You've got a bike that's going to cost you a lot of money as well. So in terms of pure impressiveness, yeah, the Ducati has got to be kind of get top spot. But, you know, every other one of the superbikes has definitely got its strengths as well. So that's a little run through of the 2025 superbikes. It's been amazing riding. They never fail to impress. You know, even though I'm lucky enough to race superbikes as well, these road bikes are just bonkers, and it takes ages to get your head around how bonkers they are, if you ever do. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out in 2026. Obviously we've got the V4R, Panigale, we've got the Suzuki. Who knows what else is around the corner. So that's that for this ridden and rated video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. We'll see you again very soon.
Perfect. But which one would you buy?
Which one would I buy? Very good question. I would buy BMW.
Why is that?
Just because I'm so used to it.